What we're going to be going through in this video is a quick overview of Magic BPM and how it relates to the game. There are other games that use frame-based timing, but for this video we're going to be focusing on how it applies to 2DX and how Magic BPMs apply to 2DX specifically. There's a lot of things that point to 2DX having a frame-based timing system, from the game doing a monitor check and checking how many frames per second the monitor runs at its refresh rate, to each song having individual timing windows set using frames. Now, the timing window system in 2DX, the P grade window is always 2 frames, but other songs can have a slightly larger normal grade window, specifically on like tax songs or Scorpion Fire. That's another example. Some songs have a slightly smaller bad window, specifically songs like Spica or Spica, however you want to call it. And I figured this would be a good video to make because there's a lot of confusion still about how Magic BPMs work, and they're not really that complex to understand. You just have to think about it a little bit, and I'll show you guys the thinking process exactly about how it works. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just enter 60 because the game runs at 60 frames per second, right? It's a frame-based timing system. The P grade window is always 2 frames, no matter what. So notes have to be placed either on 1 frame or another frame, like because it's 60 frames per second, you can only have notes placed in 1/60th increments. And we're going to see later on that that is a huge limitation of the game's engine. So I entered 60 frames per second, right? And we want to see how many frames is that in a minute. So it's very simple. All I'm going to do is multiply by 60. 60 seconds in 1 minute, we get 3,600. And now the next step we're going to do, I'm going to make this very simple, is we want to see, we're going to divide 150 for 150 BPM. And we get 24 frames. So what is BPM exactly? Why did I divide 150 into 3,600? Well, let's take a look at this definition right here. I had this brought up. This website can explain it much better than I can. So basically what it says is that, just pay attention to this sentence right here. For example, a time signature of 4x4 indicates that a quarter note is 1 full beat and that there are 4 beats in each measure of the song. So we don't have to worry about time signatures per se. All this is really telling us is that BPM is just saying how many quarter notes are you doing in 1 minute, and that's the tempo, that's the measurement system of the tempo of a piece of music, right? So in this case, 150 BPM is just simply 150 quarter notes in a minute. So when we divide that, we get 24 frames. So there are 24 frames between each note, each quarter note, right? And so we want to figure out what's eighth notes. Well, eighth notes is just double the speed of a quarter note. So we're going to divide this number by 2. So there are 12 frames between each note. And what do we want to do if we want to figure out what are 16th notes? Well, we just divide this number by 2 again, and there are 6 frames between each note, assuming this is just 150 BPM, right? 150 BPM 16ths. And let's say we want to figure out what are 30 seconds. Well, we divide the number by 2 again, and we get 3 frames. So there are 3 frames between each note at 150 BPM 30-second notes. So I'm going to clear that out, and we're going to go back to 3,600 divided by 200. So let's see what that is. That is 18 frames, right? And let's figure out what are eighth notes. Divide this by 2, we get 9 frames. And what do we want to do when we want to figure out 16ths? We divide the number by 2. And here we run into a very interesting problem. We have a decimal, so you can't have 4.5 frames of note spacing between each note. it's either going to be, it has to be a whole number, no matter what. It has to either be 4 or 5. And we're going to be seeing what the game actually does in these cases. So I have this song here. Everyone knows it. It's May Another. And we're going to jump to a certain section. See, nope, that's not the section I want. So let's bring this down here. All right, so what I'm doing here is that I have this video set at 720p 60 frames per second, and we need a video that runs at 60 frames per second. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pressing the period key on my keyboard to advance the video by 1 frame, so we can go frame by frame and do a full analysis of what's going on in this song. And if we can take a look at this calculator, so we said that eighth notes at 200 BPM, there's a 9-frame gap. So what we're going to be looking for is that since this is the beginning of the song, these are eighth notes, we're going to be checking to see if there's a 9-frame gap. So let's take a look at, we're taking a look at 3, look at the position of 3, and then look at the position of 2. And when it reaches the same spot, that's where we're going to stop. So I'm going to press period. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is a 9-frame gap, like we said. So let's do that again. This time we're going to be looking at a 1-3 chord. So look at the position of 2. It's a little hard to see because of the note flare, but let's go through it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you see this is 9 frames. There is no irregularities going on between what these note quantizations. It's perfectly even. Now let's jump to a 16th note section. So this is a good example. So here, we're looking at the position of key 6, and we're going to be looking at the position of the 1, 3, 7 chord. So let's go. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we said in the calculator that there's a 4.5 frame gap, and for these 2 notes, there's a 4-frame gap. And what do you think happens on the next note? Well, let's take a look at that right now. So we are at the 1, 3, 7 chord. We're going to be looking at the 4 note. So I'm going to do this again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what it's doing really is that it has to best like round out the difference. You can't have a 4.5 frame gap. So for one note, maybe there will be a 4-frame gap. Then the next note will be 5, and 4, 5, 4, 5. And we can keep going with this over and over, and you'll see that this is exactly what the game is doing, and that's why this 200 BPM 16ths are not considered a magic BPM. So we can take a look again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that was a 4-frame gap. And I guess where I'm going with this is that depending on the BPM, the note quantization you use, the game will do very funky things because it has only so many frames to work with to represent each note quantization in the game. The game can't possibly represent each note quantization at every single BPM with an even distribution of frames. There's always going to be this rounding factor that goes on. So yeah, that sucks. But here's one thing is that people are speculating that the Lightning Cab that's coming out soon for Heroic Verse is going to change up the whole game because the game this monitor runs at 120 frames per second. And so as you can see here, this is 4.5 frames. But if we had a 120 frame per second monitor and the game ran at 120 frames, this would be 9 frames. So each note would have more even spacing, and you wouldn't have many of these issues where the game has to choose between one note being 1 frame early or one note being 1 frame late. There's much more leeway in how you can round out the notes properly so you have a more even distribution in terms of note spacing. Now for the last part of the video, I'm going to show you guys another trick you can use. This song is Happy Wedding. Everyone hates it. Everyone knows it's swung. But how swung is it? Nobody knows what they're exactly hitting. They're just guessing. People are mostly guessing. It's just a feel thing, right? So I'm going to show you a way so you can know what you're hitting exactly, what the game expects you to hit exactly. And I'm doing basically the same thing that I've been doing before. It's just making sure that I have a video that runs at 60 frames per second at least, and I'm gonna go frame by frame and see what the note quantizations are, what is the note spacing in terms of frames. So let's go jump through and see if I can figure out something. Let's jump to a certain section. Okay, so this one's good. So well, this guy hit early. So we're gonna be looking at key 5 and key 3. So pay attention to the note spacing of this. So looking at key 5, looking at the position of key 3. 1. So there was only a 1 frame gap between each note. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a shortcut. We've been doing things starting at 3,600. I just want to see what things are at 900. So I'm going to do 900 and divided by 1, right? That's 900. And yeah, those two notes are equal to 900 BPM 16ths or 450 BPM 30 seconds. There's only a 1 frame gap. And the peak rate window is only 2 frames. So if you hit the late peak rate window and you just hit it as a 3/5 chord, you would get a just rate or a peak rate on the late frame, and you would get a peak rate on the early window because there's only a 1 frame gap. That just goes to show you how you can use the peak rate window to your advantage, assuming there's a 1 frame gap, right? So let's look at these next two notes, right? So we're looking at key 3 and key 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's look at how fast that is. So 900 divided by 5, that's 180 BPM. So those two notes were the equivalent of 180 BPM 16ths. And this is a 126 BPM song, so what is that exactly? So let's figure that out. So 180 times 16, we divide this by 126, and we get this mess. This is mess. It's 22.85 notes. This doesn't look like any note quantization I know. Anyway, I'm not going to go through this entire video because this song is filled with these little tricks like these, but you can do this on absolutely every song in the game. Some other examples may be Perditus Paradisus, or Mara Nectaris, or Strayed Cats, you name it. It works on every single song, as long as you have a video of it running at 60 frames per second. You don't have to go on Textage and like squint your eyes trying to figure out what they exactly mean by this note placement at this part of the note grid, right? You have a way to look at what the game expects you to hit exactly. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I'll be glad to answer them. If you'd like to see more videos like these, I have more ideas for videos covering 2DX and like the inner workings of it. So yeah, that's it, and have a good day, everybody. See you later.